Samram. I'm a director at Citrus Consulting Services based here in Dubai. Citrus, we are an advanced consulting partner with AWS. We work across Middle East and Africa as a market, and look forward to having this session with you folks today. I hope everybody's keeping safe. More important these days. So in terms of agenda, what I wanted to cover, this is considered as a Cloud 101, yeah? For people who are still thinking about whether cloud is the right thing to adopt or to move forward in terms of your IT infrastructure. Does it make sense? Does it add any value to your business? So this is the session essentially covers all of these aspects. Why you should consider about cloud infrastructure, how it can help you to enhance your business, especially in this competitive market, and more importantly, how it allows you to manage your IT budget. Moving from CapEx to OpEx, and more importantly, it's not just about a cost conversation, but it's also equally about how you can modernize your IT infrastructure while you're effectively managing your IT budget. So I'll talk about briefly about what's happening today in terms of macroeconomic conditions, considering COVID-19 situations. I'll touch upon AWS and how AWS, Amazon Web Services, how it is standing out as a key player in the cloud market, and what are the different ways you could achieve your business goals by adopting AWS Cloud and the associated technologies. And last, as Citrus Consulting, how we are helping our customers to get through this cloud adoption journey safely, and more importantly, how they can realize the value out of this cloud journey. Now, in terms of if you look at the macroeconomic situations, considering the COVID-19, if you asked me 6 months ago, I wouldn't have, even in my wildest dreams, I wouldn't have guessed where we are today. We all thought that, things are going to get better, things are going to get, more and more, business is going to grow more and more. But unfortunately, we're at a situation now, we're looking at the GDPs of many countries in GCC, in MENA, are starting to degrow, starting to see the signs of decline in terms of overall economic growth prospects. You look at GCC, as per the statistics, research from one of the research companies, GCC is degrown by 0.8%, and MENA, Middle East and North Africa, is degrown by 6.7%. And the industries that are in the first line of fire are the airlines, tourism, because of the lockdown. These industries that are like in the first line of fire have been greatly impacted. One of the things when you look at macroeconomic movements, you will see immediate effect on the first the industries that are the first line of fire. But if this dip or depression sort of sustains over a period of time, you would start to see that degrowth progressing into the secondary and the tertiary industries. For example, you take airlines. The airlines got immediately impacted, and 1 quarter, 2 quarters down the line, the suppliers to those airlines, started seeing the impact, and the suppliers to the suppliers will start to see the impact, as things sort of, prolong. The dip starts to, prolong beyond a certain point. So the idea is not to sort of, scare you or anything, but to give you a ground reality, right? So the situation, it'll take a long time for the situation to kind of recover. Definitely, the governments are doing great things to keep the economy afloat. Um, but as business, we all have certain responsibilities or necessities to keep our business survive through this tough times. Now, the interesting fact is that while COVID-19 had caused a lot of havoc or created a lot of disruptions in a lot of industries, but at the same time, it has also created unique set of opportunities for certain industries and sectors. For example, because of COVID-19 lockdown situations, we've started seeing a huge uplift in terms of demand for cloud-based collaboration platforms, virtual desktop infrastructures, VDI-based solutions. And since people are working remote, now suddenly your data center perimeter is now expanding into people, employees' homes. Your threat vector has increased, so you got to maintain your security posture. That in turn created a lot of need for digital security. So we see a lot of trends sort of emerging, and businesses are forced to make investments because these are the things which you cannot procrastinate, you cannot delay it. Primarily because these are essential elements today to enable your employees to work from home, stay productive. So many businesses are now thinking, okay, so these are new trends that are coming out. There's new investments that we have to make, but where do I go find budget for it? I don't have the capex budget for these things to acquire these solutions. So what do I do? So the option would many companies are now adopting is to look at ways to reduce the OpEx. And what are the savings that they're getting out of the OpEx savings? Now they're looking at investing into these solutions. So companies who are trying to find ways to save on their OpEx or reduce their OpEx and completely remove CapEx out of the IT budget, cloud is definitely an option to consider. Now, when you look at cloud, why cloud infrastructure? What's wrong with traditional data center? I own the hardware, I own the storage. It's in my data center approach, right? The biggest differentiator is the ability to scale, ability to stay agile. That's the biggest advantage. Because today, if you're looking at any data center-based investments, you have to think 2 years, 3 years, 5 years in advance, right? So if you're acquiring a piece of hardware, you got to look at, okay, what is my business growth for the next 3 years? When I invest in that piece of hardware, will this piece of hardware, will it support me for the next 3 years or 5 years as my business is growing? So you have to factor future growth as part of your capacity planning. Hence, you have to go out and secure capacity for your future today. So that means there is, cash flow that's being spent on a piece of hardware, which you will only untap it 2 years, 3 years from now. So unlike this, the cloud infrastructure allows you to start small and scale big as your business grows, right? So the second element is the nearly unlimited scalability. So you can start with one virtual machine today or EC2 instance today, and you can scale to 100, 200, 300, 1,000, what we call horizontally scaling, right? And you can even consider vertical scaling. If your application works in more of vertical scaled approach, you can start with a 8 GB RAM machine, and you can scale to 16 GB, 32 GB, 64 GB. You can vertically scale or increase your resource capacity As your demand grows, as your number of end consumers who are accessing the application starts to grow, you look at ways and means to horizontally or vertically scale your IT infrastructure. And the beauty with all of this is you pay what you consume. So that cost efficiency, value for the money is the biggest differentiator when it comes to going with public cloud infrastructure. The other important feature which makes the cloud infrastructure stand out is the inherent reliability. So what I mean by that is all of the data centers, if we look at AWS availability regions or availability zones and the data centers today, they're all built with N+1 architecture. So what I mean by that is there is redundancy in every possible layer, right from the underlying power to communication channel to hardware to storage. At every single layer, you have redundancy. Imagine if you have to bring in that level of reliability into your data center. So for a single application, now you have to consider, okay, I need to put a cluster, I need to have a secondary machine. For that secondary machine, I need to consider either a standby or a DR. So it multiplies your cost investments. So anything that you would have spent $100,000 because of high availability, now you're considering, twice. So you're considering $200,000 for a HA. Now, if you want to consider DRBCP, business continuity plan, and you have to triple your investment. So whereas the cloud infrastructure, at least to that hypervisor level, the reliability is built in. So you don't have to worry about building redundancy at the power level or communication level or the hardware level. And all of these you get without a single piece of compromise on the security layer. So you get the military grade. It doesn't matter whether you're swiping your credit card for $100 consumption a month or $100,000 consumption a month paid through invoice. It doesn't matter. You get the same grade of security in terms of the physical security, in terms of your the hypervisor hardware level, the communication layer. You get that military grade security. Of course, there is a concept of shared responsibility when it comes to security. As far as the public cloud infrastructure is concerned. So every customer do have the equal responsibility to manage their own infrastructure because AWS do not have access to your infrastructure, what we call VPC, virtual private cloud. So the moment we create a VPC and give you that tenant, then from there on, you have the responsibility of managing it. But anything below, AWS takes care of that security. So what you get is, it doesn't matter $100 or $100,000, you get a military grade on par security. The same if you have to replicate it in your data center, it's going to cost you a lot of money, even if it is a small web application. Now you're looking at a perimeter firewall, you're looking at IDS and IPS, your core switch and a top of the rack switch. There's a lot of investments that you have to put in place even before you start spinning up your first virtual machine on premise. Whereas in case of cloud, everything is taken care of for you by default. And if you look at AWS today, they're one of the market leaders when it comes to hyperscale cloud infrastructure, and they've been there in that position for the last 9 consecutive years. And it's not something, it's easy to achieve because you always have this early starter advantage only for a certain period of time because the one and the second and third tend to catch up pretty quick because it's easy to replicate what you do, which you have taken 3 years to invent. Probably would have taken only 3 months for anyone to replicate it, right? So if somebody who's maintaining a leadership position for 9 years consecutive, so that means it shows the level of commitment and innovation that they are bringing, and the pace at which they doing innovation is very difficult for anyone to catch up. Number two and number three is very difficult for anyone to catch up. So that's why AWS, in terms of public cloud, it's one of the most reliable and one of the most worthy of a company to make your investments and build your IT infrastructure on top of AWS. In terms of why customers choose AWS, for these reasons, if you look at it, they have the early starter advantage. It's one of the oldest, public company, hyperscale cloud company. They have a global reach. There are 76 availability zones. It spans across 24 regions. So what we call as regions, as like, for example, Middle East, Bahrain is one region. Within that, you have multiple availability zones, and each availability zone will have more than 2 or more data centers. So consider, just imagine the level of reach and the redundancy, what you're gonna get. In terms of security and compliance, I think pretty much all of the compliance that are out there, majority of them, AWS is compliant on. So things like HIPAA, FISMA. FISMA is the one that U.S. government dictates for any government agencies to host their IT infrastructure in terms of data protection, PCI DSS standards. So CAPA. So a lot of these compliance are very difficult to adhere to, and AWS have more than 200 compliance, security and compliance features. In terms of other benefits, things like it gives you extremely high IOPS, even if you're looking at most complex and highly sort of transactional systems. You can comfortably host them because we can scale up to 80,000 IOPS per instance. Just to give you an average, for a database, we're looking at anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000 IOPS would be an average requirement. Imagine you can scale up to 80,000 IOPS per instance. So, and in terms of innovations and product releases, it's pretty staggering because they do what we call these micro releases. It's scaling to like 1,000 plus releases every year, plus 165 new offerings that they have under their portfolio. Now, in terms of regional presence, I talked about earlier. They have global presence. Very recently, they had launched Bahrain as a Middle East region. So now all the customers locally in GCC or Middle East or even MENA, for that matter, will be able to leverage Bahrain as a region with extremely low latency. To the tune of, say, for example, from UAE, we're talking about anywhere between 35 milliseconds. And even Mumbai, for that matter, we're finding it extremely, good in terms of, response and low latency networking. Again, Mumbai, we're talking about anywhere between, 35 to 40, 45 milliseconds. So majority of their applications can be comfortably hosted on these regions, and users won't see a thing in terms of latency. Now, to adopt or to evaluate cloud vendors, what should a customer look for, right? So these are some of the things that any customer would generally look for, like are there any global, do we have a global infrastructure? And depending on the nature of your business, if you're in banking or financial sector, you might want to consider putting your primary in one region and the secondary in a completely different region and another geographical location. If you even go by the tectonic plates, You even consider that one in the European plate and one in the Asia Pacific plate. And latency, if you look at it, we can achieve more or less the same level of latency, depending on which part of the world you belong to. Security is another important aspect, which is again, depending on the nature of the business. If you're in healthcare sector, if you have the regulations like HIPAA, do the cloud providers have these compliances? Or if you're dealing with credit cards, online e-commerce site, and you're storing credit card information, you do have the PCI DSS compliance requirements. So you got to look at, okay, which industry you're in, what are the regulations, the global regulations, as well as your local regional law of the land, local regulations, and the cloud provider, do they give you the level of security and the compliance so you can comfortably run your business without violating any of the rules. In terms of innovations, because you might start with a simple, virtual machine or IaaS, what we call infrastructure as a service type workloads, but then over a period of time, as things evolve and as you're doing innovation within your organization, you might want to consider adopting other things that are coming up, like containers or platform as a service. You could consider leveraging those services to enhance your business application. So, do these cloud providers innovate, or they stagnated and they're like offer you 10 set of things and it's limited? Yeah. So cost, another very important aspect. Do you get the value for the buck? Do you get the economies of scale? So cost is another important aspect. Performance is another important aspect. If your applications might have very sort of unique performance requirements in terms of IOPS, in terms of memory configurations of CPU, clock speeds. Do these vendors offer benchmarking certifications? For example, SAP. There are certified instances where you can run your SAP HANA on AWS Cloud, and it starts extremely small. It can scale to the level of 700 GB RAM machine, where you can run a single instance, HANA instance on one EC2. So performance is another aspect you would want to consider. Then the support and documentation in terms, because this is an interesting is what is the level of support? What is the level of knowledge and reach that are out there, right? How easy or difficult it is. So once you adopt, how easy or difficult it is to find the talent out in the market, so you can continue to keep your business thriving. So it's an important aspect in terms of identifying what is the level of knowledge and reach and documentation that are out there. So you can continue to support your IT infrastructure. Track record is definitely another important aspect, because you also need to know whether are you betting on an infrastructure that is going to thrive for the next 10, 15, 20 years ahead, or you're investing into small time local hosting provider. They exist today. They might run into cash flow issues, 6 months down the line or 2 years down the line, they shut shop, walk away. So are you still protected? So track record is extremely, important. And the support, as I talked about earlier, it doesn't matter whether you're small or an enterprise, you should have, the same level of attention and support. So with AWS, how do you reach your business goals? So there are various scenarios that you could consider moving to AWS. For example, you're running out of resources in your data center. Rather than you going out buying more capacity in your data center, you could consider moving some of the workloads to cloud, free up your resources so you can expand, within your data center without having to making big capital investment on buying new hardware. You could, if you're running on legacy applications, you could consider modernizing the applications, leveraging cloud native, AWS native services, which will help you to reduce the cost, but at the same time, help you to modernize your applications. Now, while you're running your applications out there on the cloud, you're generating data. Using that data, you can now generate more insights. You can apply more machine learning capabilities that are out there available within AWS. So you can put your data to use to support your business, even better. So security, compliance, resilience. If you're having any security challenges, it's another way of looking at it, to move your workloads to AWS where it is, secured and compliant, and you get that resilience, business resilience, by default. And organize speed and agility, skills and experience gaps. So there are certain things that, as you keep running your aging data center, you're finding it difficult to find talent to keep your data center, keep the lights on your data center. This is the time you should consider moving to cloud, where the skills are now widely available, the experience is proven. So you can have a better protection of your IT infrastructure. So when it comes to, as I talked about, migrating to cloud and freeing up resources in your data center for other purposes, definitely it gives you the reduction in your capex, and maintaining your OpEx as it is. Retrain your existing staff where they continue to support your current infrastructure. At the same time, they can support your cloud infrastructure, or you let your existing staff focus into projects, the things that you were like reprioritizing because of lack of bandwidth in existing staff. Maybe something you could consider doing it, and consider this as an opportunity to so like I was saying, in terms of migrating your workloads to cloud, freeing up your IT resources, be it your data center resources, be it your personnel, IT support staff. Now you can focus your resources into things that really matters, and move the ones that could potentially be kept outside of your data center, move them to cloud, move fast, quick, so you don't end up in going out and making some capital investment and procuring new hardware. Yeah. Now, moving to cloud is one thing, but at the same time, it also gives you an ongoing opportunities to optimize your OpEx. So, for example, today you're moving to cloud, you're spending, say, $100, right? You still have ways and means to optimize and bring it down to $50, $40, $30, depending on the type of workloads and depending on the type of changes that you're willing to make to those applications. You can achieve a great level of cost savings. For example, if you look at it, taking an application from on-premise and doing a simple lift and shift, or what we call forklift. Say you provision some 64 GB RAM machine, 16 cores storage, say 2 terabytes. It will cost you X amount of dollars to keep it on premise and you move to cloud, definitely you will see an element of cost savings. May or may not be big savings. However, the same can be, for example, you do the right sizing. You look at your historical usage pattern of the application. You then say, okay, I do not require 64 GB. I think I'm comfortable with 32 GB because I'm looking at it. I've never hit the real memory consumption. I'm not even paging or doing a swap from the memory. So we don't require 64 GB. Maybe I over provisioned it in my on-premise. So now you do the right sizing, instance right sizing, that can give you, a big cost savings. Look at elasticity. Instead of you putting one server 32 GB, assume it's a web server, for instance, why not consider spreading them out? I'll put 8 GB machine, 4 machines. Now, at the peak, I will expand to 4, but when the user requests are extremely low, I require only a pilot-like machine. I might just stick to 1, or I might stick to just 2, 1 on each availability zone. So that way you're again bringing your cost down from 4 machines to 2 machines, and it can scale to 4, what we call elasticity, based on the load, right? And over a period of time, you measure the utilization and you continue to, improvise, optimize the EC2 size, and so on and so forth. You can do storage optimization. Now you could even consider moving this, for example, on the same example of web server, you can consider moving them to, if it's just a web server which is handling the request and passing it back to your application server, consider moving to API gateway, where API gateway handles your get put requests, or move your authentication to AWS Cognito, where it can even handle the authentication, the session management. So if you move towards more and more of managed services, so for your DynamoDB for your session management, Cognito for your authentication, your API gateway for your web handling your web requests and get put requests. So now you're moving away from a persistent layer of infrastructure, like you're running a web server 24/7, 365 days. Even if I don't have a single user coming and hitting my web server, I'm still keeping, just because I need to keep the lights on, keep the website active, I still have to keep running this machine. So instead, if you move towards managed services, like I talked about API gateways or Cognito or DynamoDB, essentially AWS will charge you based on consumption. So if you have 10 users, you pay only for the actual consumption of those resources. You don't have to pay for the persistent, IT infrastructure. So, so as you keep optimizing your applications, optimizing your IT workloads, you will see more and more, cost savings. And AWS encourages customers to go down that path, where you see more and more, you realize more and more potential of AWS. So the things that I talked about, modernizing your application, is another way of modernizing your IT, modernizing your application infrastructure, and then by doing that, you save costs. So traditionally, we look at monolithic applications as rigid 2-tier or 3-tier architecture. There is a web server, say Apache base, and there is an application server, say Tomcat base, and there is a database server, MySQL. And typically when we do this design, we do, 2 web servers for high availability, 2 application servers for the, again, for the middleware high availability, and then redundant database, 2 database servers, again, for redundancy. And if you wanted to scale the capacity, you would go, increase the memory from 16 GB to 32 GB or 32 GB to 64 GB. So you vertically scale, right? So It worked, a decade ago, but in current scenario, when certain types of businesses are growing in leaps and bounds, suddenly you go from 10 users to 10,000 users, right? Or 10 transactions to 10,000 transactions. So in a typical monolithic application design, you would have to design your applications to handle 10,000 users. It doesn't matter even if you were only at any given point in time, you're only having 10 active users. So you have to design your application for your, what we call breaking point, right? But when you move towards more and more microservices-based design, essentially what we're doing is we're breaking the components, by functionality or by feature into microservices where they're totally decoupled. They're no longer monolithic. They're entirely decoupled. So even if you need to update a certain module, a certain feature, you could do it independently without, impacting the other features. So for example, if you just want to do a promotion module update, so you could still keep your e-commerce site up and running. Only thing is, for that momentary period, the offers or the promotion section will not be functional. Yeah. So it allows you to, run your application, your business much, efficiently. And in terms of, look at the ROI, return on investments, monolithic application development versus, microservices-based application development. It takes months to procure, sort of workloads and applications. It requires large upfront investments. Essentially, you build for 3 months, 6 months, whatnot, and then you release it. Whereas in case of microservices, you can start with, okay, you know what, I'll just launch my e-commerce site. I'll get my service catalog, my cart, the user profile, user management, my payment gateway. I'll get the basic ones ready, launch it. And even we could do that in a matter of hours as opposed to days or weeks or months. And in terms of investment, it's only incremental, right? Because you're doing service-based to deployment approach. Now, moving into the analytics space. So as you're running your workloads now on the cloud, you're generating lots of data. Now you can put that data to use to derive more insights. And same e-commerce as an example, real time. If you want to look at, I want to look at the number of active users right now. At what page, what product they're looking at real time. Is there a real time promotions that I can run, so I can convert this particular visitor into a customer, right? So you can do real-time recommendations as well. So Amazon offers you recommendation engine as a service. So you could pass the historical usage or behavior, and you can generate your predictions, and you can take real-time decisions, based on that. And there are other services, not just the recommendations. There are other services as well. If your business is relying on advanced analytics, things like machine learning or AI, AWS is one of the leader in the arena. So a lot of services, things like SageMaker, if you're not sure what type of machine learning you want to adopt, so it's like a canvas. You can start, you can build your own models, or if you're looking at we have a specific forecast problem, then you could use AWS Forecast, which is a specific service built by AWS, a machine learning service built by AWS, targeted towards forecast-related problems. It could be, inventory forecasting. It could be, price forecasting. sales forecasting. You can do any kind of forecasting using those services. And the beauty is, like I said, application is sitting there on the AWS infrastructure. All of these services are also available in the same ecosystem, and it becomes much easier for you to consume and leverage all of these services. And the beauty is, all of these services come with an extremely low entry barrier. That means you can even start with a small experimentation, and if you find the solution is working very effectively for your business, then you can scale big. Yeah. So the point I talked about, taking an idea from a concept to a production deployment, real world use, it's the most fastest, secure, and low cost way. Yeah. Now, in terms of what we bring to the table, how we as Citrus, we help our customers to adoption journey, because for customers who are like traditionally data center centric businesses, it can be a bit daunting to adopt the cloud. I think this is where, as an advanced consulting partner, Citrus helps the customers to handhold, walk the journey with them, from the maturity stage of 0 to all the way to the maturity stage of 5, where you're independent, you have a strong in-house team which can support you, and you're building more and more services. You're delivering innovation to your businesses by leveraging cloud services. So what we offer is, for example, we give a complete end-to-end cloud services, right from the consulting to design, implementation, even managed services. So consulting in the sense where we can help you derive your 3 years, 5 years IT strategy, strategy to modernize your IT infrastructure, strategy to modernize your business applications. So we can help you with that, consulting. And then it's not just like a consulting report, but we also follow through, take that consulting output, create a design, create an implementation roadmap, and help you to realize that strategy, what we have helped you to put in place, or the vision what you have in your mind, help you to put that or make that come to reality. So with that respect, we help customers with doing a free TCO analysis on AWS. We're helping customers with doing a consultation on disaster recovery and business continuity on AWS. And if you're an AWS customer, we're also helping these customers to optimize and bring down your monthly consumption costs. Several different ways we help. We look at from commitment model to application redesign to infrastructure right sizing. So we help customers, even when existing AWS customers, we help them to bring down their monthly costs. So like I said, our offerings on cloud is quite comprehensive, and it's a wholesome offering. We start from the consulting to design to implementation and managed service. So if you are an organization where you feel like in our businesses to run the retail shop, not to run the IT. So I want somebody to take care of the IT infrastructure for us and sign an SLA. We can provide that as well as part of our managed services. Yeah. So we're at the tail end of our session today. So in case if you have any questions or feedback or any business problem which we can solve with cloud technologies and specifically with AWS, please feel free to reach out to any one of these gentlemen that you see on the screen right now. The contact details are there. Please feel free to reach out. So we have Imam from AWS. Happy to support you. We have Harpreet, Rahul, and Ashish, who are based here in Dubai, but they reach out to customers across the region. So feel and we'll be happy to support. So at this point, I will pause the presentation.
Dan,
and we will
there are
go
a couple
for
of
Q&A.
questions. Hello, Dan?
Yes, Anana.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions. So one of the audience member is asking, can we select specific hardware for bare metal deployment?
So there are certain types like memory intensive applications or CPU intensive applications. There are specific types of hardware that are available. So if you're going for a dedicated hardware, you can choose whether it is R5 or i3. You can choose the type of instance depending on your workload and workload requirements.
Okay. The next question is, how about any Unix support? Example, someone having Oracle Spark or HP UX, can they move to identical hardware platform?
So unfortunately, these are what we call risk-based systems, be it HP Unix or Spark systems, Solaris systems. These are risk-based. Currently, the support what we have in AWS are all x86 based. So anything to do with x86 based Linux systems or all Windows systems are supported. If you have an application, you can bring them. We can, certain applications we have helped customers to do platform conversion from, say, IBM AX or Solaris into Linux-based, operating systems. So natively Linux-based operating systems like, Red Hat, Amazon has its own Linux flavors. These are supported. So we have out of the box what we call AMIs available. So if you have a customized image, you can bring your customized image as well. But these are, like I said, again, just to emphasize, these are only x86 platforms. It's CISC platforms, not RISC platforms.
Okay. The next question is, how about Elastic Cloud support, and what percentage the Elastic Cloud can expand and shrink upon usage?
So it's policy based. It is definitely supported and it is definitely recommended as long as your application can handle elasticity. The example I chose, e-commerce. You have a front end. You could start with just 2 instances. But depending on the load, you can policy-based, right? You can define the policy based on the number of connections or based on the CPU resource utilization. You can set threshold, so it will automatically scale. And based on the policy conditions, it will again, detach these images from your cluster. And even attaching the images to machines to your Elastic clusters can be automated. So you pre-build the image, you do all the configurations, so you put a load balancer in front of your application. So if based on the policy, the threshold is met, it will automatically join. Again, policy-based, you can have an incremental of 2 virtual machines getting added or just 1 machine getting added to the cluster. It's policy-based, you can define as per your business requirements.
Sure. The next question is, what applications support AWS? So this particular attendee is saying that they're running their applications on legacy system, and they're not sure if the same will work on AWS.
Okay. So, like I said, earlier response, as long as it's an x86-based system, even if it is a legacy, if they're running on Windows, definitely they're supported. If you're running on Linux, as long as it's one of the x86 flavors, definitely that is supported. And it's primarily the platform and the operating system is what AWS certifies. They don't go by application by application. A few exceptions are like of SAP and Oracle. That's mostly to do with the licensing. But otherwise, in terms of platform support and the operating system support, they're fairly well documented, and it's a standard list. So if you check on the application or the platform compatibility list on AWS documentation side, you will be able to find out. So based on the operating system, is it x86? Then you will get your answer straight.
Okay. So the next question is, what type of file services are supported? Can we host SMB, CIFS-based file services instead of any object storage?
Yes, so they're supported. You have the file server service. You have EFS service. They're supported. SMB, I'll have to check the Samba, but KIPS, Windows file servers, they're definitely supported. They had helped a lot of customers to migrate their file service, Windows file service over to AWS. And there are varieties of use cases. There are use cases where we had one customer storing their engineering drawing. These sometimes these files can go to 2 GB, 5 GB in size, a single file. We were able to even migrate that file server over to AWS, and it worked just fine. So users will mount them as a user drive, and they will access it from their design drawing application. And the files are served through from AWS file service. And depending on the latency requirements, there are various ways we can design it. For example, we can have a local cache within your data center, like a storage gateway, which can keep. We can do the storage tiering, right? So anything active the last 3 months, 6 months, we keep it locally cached. Anything that are older, we can keep it on the cloud in case if you have low latency, high throughput type requirements for your file server. So yeah, it is supported.
Okay.
We'll take one more question in the interest of time, and then for the other questions, definitely we'll do a follow-up and we will summarize and send our responses.
Sure. So the next question is it possible to run the application-based cluster nodes in different AWS zones in single accounts?
Sorry, come again? What was the question again?
Is it possible to run the application-based cluster nodes in different AWS zones in single accounts?
Yeah, of course. So you can have, you can design your application in such a way to leverage multiple AZs. So in fact, AWS and Citrus, we recommend to design your application that are spread across multiple AZs. So that way, even if you have an outage or application crash on one AZ, your application from the other AZ can serve your customers. So for a proper design, we will definitely recommend keeping your application spread across multiple AZs within a region. And this would be under single account and a single VPC. So the network layout, everything is within your VPC limits.
Sure. Thank you, Dan, for having the session. Any other questions we will be addressing to you separately. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We will be sharing the recorded webinar once it's downloaded and we edit the file. We'll be sharing it to you individually. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us directly based on the contacts which Dan had initially shared during the webinar. Other than that, thank you very much. Have a good evening. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for staying with us. Please take care. Be safe. We'll see you again in another webinar session. Take care.
Thanks.